Single dad kept his distance at dinner. His daughters didn't let her leave alone. Some people protect themselves so well that they don't realize they are also protecting their loneliness. Daniel Whitmore had mastered the art of sitting at a dinner table without truly there. At 39, the American single father had learned how to smile at the right time, nod when needed, and keep his heart locked behind polite words. Across from him sat Claire, her fingers wrapped around a glass of water she had barely touched. The table was set neatly, the food warm, the house calm. Everything looked right, yet something invisible stood between them, tall and cold. Daniel's two daughters, Ava and Leela, sat quietly on either side of the table. They were used to silence that pretended to be peace. The soft clinking of forks against plates filled the room more than conversation did. Daniel asked safe questions. About Claire's job at the library, about the weather turning colder, about a new bakery downtown. He kept his tone gentle but careful, as if every word had been checked before leaving his mouth. Claire answered kindly. She smiled. She tried, but she could feel it, the careful distance. Daniel was present, but not open. His eyes carried tiredness that had nothing to do with work. She had seen that look before in people who had been left behind. Years ago, Daniel had not been like this. After his divorce, he tried dating again. He tried believing that someone could stay. But each attempt ended the same way. Women told him he was too much because of his daughters, or not enough because he moved slowly. Some said they admired his devotion but did not want the responsibility. Rejection came softly at first, then bluntly. Over time, he stopped offering pieces of himself. It felt safer to give politeness instead of vulnerability. He told himself it was for his daughters. Stability mattered. Drama did not belong in their home. If he never opened the door fully, no one could slam it shut. What he did not admit was that he was also protecting himself from hearing, once again, that he was not chosen. Claire sensed this wall. She had noticed how he never spoke about his own dreams, only about schedules, and she had noticed how he changed the subject when conversations became personal. Even tonight, as candlelight flickered gently, he avoided anything that might require honesty beyond facts. Ava, 12 years old and observant beyond her age, watched Claire carefully. Lila, 9, noticed the small things, the way Claire's smile faded when Daniel checked his phone, the way she glanced toward the hallway as if measuring how easy it. Children are often the quiet guardians of feelings. Adults think they hide well. Ava could feel when someone was about to disappear. She had seen it before. First her mother, who slowly became more absent even before the divorce papers. Then a woman named Marissa, who stopped coming to dinner after 3 months. Ava had learned that when voices stayed calm, but eyes looked unsure, goodbye was close. Daniel continued eating, unaware of the silent signals passing between the 3 females at the table. He believed he was doing the right thing by not pushing, not expecting, not hoping too loudly. Hope had embarrassed him before. Hope had made him look foolish when others walked away without looking back. Claire folded her napkin neatly on her lap. She had come tonight planning to decide something. For weeks, she had tried to understand Daniel's distance. She admired how he packed school lunches with care and listened when his daughters spoke about their day. She saw tenderness in him, hidden but real. Yet she also felt like a guest in a house that refused to let her step fully inside. She wondered if leaving quietly would hurt less than staying where she felt half welcome. It would be easy. Finish dinner. Thank him kindly. Say she understood that maybe this was not the right time. Protect her own heart before it became attached. Across the table, Daniel noticed Claire glance at the clock. His chest tightened, but he said nothing. Part of him expected this moment. He almost rehearsed the words in his head. I understand. Thank you for trying. No hard feelings. He would say them calmly. He always did. But Ava placed her fork down slowly. She looked from her father to Claire, reading the fiver. Space between them. Lila shifted in her chair, her small hands gripping the edge of the table. They could feel the air changing. Adults thought children only heard words. They did not realize children heard silence even louder. Daniel cleared his throat and asked Claire if she wanted dessert. His voice was steady, but there was a hesitation underneath, like someone standing near a door but unsure whether to open it. Claire hesitated too. She saw the guarded man before her, but she also saw the father who never missed a school. She saw loneliness sitting beside him, dressed as composure. The candles burned lower. Plates grew cold. No one moved first. The daughters could tell. Claire was quietly preparing to say goodbye. Distance often feels safer than hope after loss. Daniel Whitmore did not wake up one day and decide to become emotionally distant. It happened slowly, like winter arriving without warning. After his divorce, he told himself he would stay strong for Ava and Lila. Strength to him meant not falling apart, not complaining, and never letting anyone see how deeply rejection had cut him. When his ex-wife left, she did not shout or slam doors. She simply said she needed a different life. That sentence stayed with him longer than any argument could. It made him question what part of him had not been enough. In the years that followed, Daniel tried to rebuild something normal for his daughters. He learned how to braid hair by watching videos late at night. He packed lunches before sunrise and worked full days without asking for help. Single parenthood did not just take his time. It narrowed his emotional world. Every decision passed through one filter. Is this good for the girls? His own feelings slowly moved to the bottom of the list. There was no space for heartbreak when homework needed checking and fevers needed calming. Over time, Daniel began to connect closeness with risk. Every time he allowed himself to care deeply for someone new, he felt the same quiet fear growing inside him. What if she leaves too? What if my daughters get attached and then have to say goodbye again? That fear did not shout, it whispered. It told him that hope was dangerous, that opening up was selfish, that keeping things polite and distant was the responsible choice. He convinced himself that restraint was wisdom. If he did not promise too much, no one would feel betrayed. If he did not show too much feeling, no one could use it. From the outside, he looked calm and steady. Inside, he was simply tired. The exhaustion did not come from work alone. It came from carrying everything alone. He was tired of being both parents, tired of pretending he did not miss having someone to share small victories with, tired of acting like loneliness was a choice instead of a wound. Daniel rarely admitted that he felt lonely. He told himself he was grateful. He had 2 healthy daughters. He had a stable job. He had a quiet home. What more could he ask for? But sometimes, late at night after the girls were asleep, he would sit on the couch and feel the weight of silence. He would scroll through his phone, not really reading anything, just filling the space so he did not have to think about the empty chair across from him. When Claire entered their lives, he noticed how easily she spoke to the girls. He noticed how she listened without rushing. A small part of him wanted to believe she might stay, but a louder part warned him not to assume. So he kept his guard up. He limited how much he shared. He avoided deep conversations. He believed he was being careful, but in truth, he was building walls so high that even kindness struggled to climb over them. He told himself this caution protected Ava and Lila. He remembered how confused they had looked when Marissa stopped coming over. He remembered Ava asking, "Did we do something wrong?" That question broke something inside him. He swore he would never let them feel that kind of uncertainty again. Better no promises than broken ones. Better distance than another goodbye. Yet children learn more from what they observe than from what they are told. Ava had become skilled at reading silence. She could tell when her father's shoulders were tense even if he smiled. Lila sensed shifts in tone the way other kids sensed changes in weather. They had grown emotionally aware, not because someone taught them, but because they had to understand the emotional climate of their home. They saw how their father avoided talking about his own feelings. They saw how he changed subjects when conversations became personal. They understood, in their own young way, that he was afraid of losing. They did not blame him. They loved him, but they also longed to see him happy in a way that did not. At dinner that night, the tension was quiet, but real. Claire's polite smile, Daniel's careful tone. The space between them felt larger than the table itself. Ava and Lila exchanged small glances. They recognized this pattern. They had lived it before. Daniel believed silence would keep everyone safe. He believed patience meant waiting for others to prove they would stay. What he did not see was that his daughters were no longer just watching. They were thinking. They were dissident. This time, the girls were not going to sit quietly and let another goodbye happen without trying to change it. Children often notice endings forming before adults admit they exist. Ava felt it first, not through words but through small changes that Claire's smile no longer reached her eyes. Her shoulders, once relaxed, now looked slightly pulled in, as if she were making herself smaller at the table. Lila noticed how Claire kept smoothing her napkin over and over, a quiet sign of nervous energy. The girls had lived through enough almost goodbyes to recognize the early signs of one forming. Daniel kept his voice calm as he spoke about ordinary things, but his eyes dropped off into his plate. He thought he was hiding his worry well. Inside, he was already preparing for the evening to end. He told himself not to expect anything different. He believed that when someone feels unsure, they usually leave. It was easier to accept that early than to hope and be disappointed later. Claire tried to stay present in the conversation, yet she felt alone in the middle of the table. She liked this family more than she had planned to. She admired how Ava helped Lila without being asked. She respected how Daniel never forgot small details about his daughter's life, but she also felt the careful distance. It made her question if she was truly wanted. Rajas politely included. The girls could sense her isolation. Ava understood that feeling too. After the divorce, she often felt like she was standing in the middle of a room where adults spoke around her, but not to her. That same invisible wall now surrounded Claire. Leela leaned slightly toward her, as if trying to close the space without making it obvious. There was a deep contrast at the table. The adults guarded their feelings, afraid of saying too much. The children, however, carried their hearts more openly. Ava believed that if something felt important, it should be said. She had learned that silence sometimes protects pain, but it can also protect loneliness. She did not want that for her father, and she did not want that for Claire. Daniel noticed Claire glance again toward the hallway where her coat rested. His chest tightened. He interpreted it as confirmation. She was preparing to leave. He felt the familiar mix of disappointment and resignation. He would not stop her. If she wanted to go, he would respect that. He always respected that. Staying, he believed, had to be someone's choice. He would never beg to be chosen. Claire's thoughts moved quickly. She told herself that walking away now would be easier than becoming attached. She reminded herself that Daniel had not truly opened up. Maybe this was simply not the right place for her. Yet something about the book, girls, made it harder. Their quiet attention felt sincere. Their kindness did not seem. Ava caught Lila's eye, and without speaking, they understood each other. They both felt the shift in the room. The air seemed thinner, like a door was slowly closed. They had seen this before with other women who visited and slowly faded away. But Claire was different. She listened. She asked about school projects. She remembered Lila's favorite color without being reminded. That kind of attention mattered. The girls also saw something their father did not realize he was showing. When Claire laughed softly at one of his careful jokes, Daniel's posture changed just a little. His shoulders eased. His eyes softened. For a moment, he looked less tired. Ava noticed it clearly. Lila noticed too. Their father looked lighter when Claire was around, even if he tried to hide it. Children as emotional gatekeepers do not guard with rules. They guard with instinct. Ava felt responsible in a quiet way. She wanted her father to have more than just routine. She wanted someone to stay not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She sensed that Claire was waiting for a sign, something real that proved she was not standing alone. Daniel, meanwhile, believed the evening was already ending. He began mentally rehearsing his polite goodbye. He convinced himself that being calm was strength. If Claire left, he would accept it without complaint. He would return to his safe routine. He would focus on work and the girls and avoid this fragile space called hope. But Ava felt something else rising inside her. It was not fear. It was decision. She had stayed quiet long enough in her young life. She had watched adults misunderstand each other because they were too careful. She did not want another story that ended because no one dared to speak honestly. Leela straightened in her chair, her small face serious. She trusted her sister's instinct. If Ava felt something needed to be done, then it probably did. They both understood that waiting might mean losing something good. Claire shifted slightly, preparing to stand. Before Claire could reach for her coat, the girls made their move. Sometimes kindness refuses to let someone disappear. Claire had already decided how she would. She would stand gently, thank Daniel for compliment the girls on how polite they were, and promise to talk soon. It would be calm. It would be mature. It would protect her heart from hoping for something that might never grow. She shifted slightly in her chair, her eyes moving toward the hallway, where her coat waited like a quiet reminder that she did not fully belong. But before she could rise, Leela slid off her chair and walked around the table. It was not dramatic. It was not low. She simply moved with small, steady steps and stopped beside Claire. Ava followed a second later, standing on the other side. They did not block her path in a demanding way. They just closed the open space that had felt so wide all evening. Leela reached for Claire's hand softly, her fingers warm and certain. "You didn't see my drawing yet," she said in a voice that carried no fear, only invitation. Ava nodded and added, "And I wanted to show you the plant we're growing in the kitchen. It's finally getting taller." Their words were simple, but their message was, "Stay. You matter here." Claire froze for a moment, surprised not by the request, but by the way it was given. There was no pressure in their eyes, no pleading, no expectation that she owed them anything. They were not trying to trap her into staying. They were simply including her, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Daniel watched from his chair, caught off guard. He had prepared himself for a polite goodbye, for another calm ending. He had told himself he would handle it with dignity. But he had not prepared for this quiet interruption. His daughters were changing the direction of the evening without asking his. For a second, he felt a loss of control, and it unsettled him. He was used to managing emotions carefully, keeping everything balanced. Now something honest and unplanned was unfolding in front of him. Claire looked at the girls, then at Daniel. She expected him to step in, to rescue her from the moment by saying they should not bother her. Instead, he remained silent. His eyes showed surprise, but also something softer. He did not stop them. The emotional space at the table began to shift. The tightness that had filled the room loosened slightly. Lila gently tugged Claire's hand, not forcefully, just enough to guide her attention away from the door and back into the house. Ava smiled in a way that felt steady and real, not like a child trying to impress an adult, but like someone offering a place beside her. Claire felt something inside her move. For weeks, she had tried to read Daniel's guarded behavior. She had wondered if she was simply passing through their lives. But in this small moment, the girls were choosing her openly. Not because of her job, not because of what she could provide, not because of status or convenience. They were choosing her because they liked her, because she listened, because she stayed when they talked about their day. Unexpected kindness has a way of breaking through defenses that logic cannot reach. Claire realized that no one at this table was asking her to promise forever. No one was demanding commitment. They were simply offering connection without conditions. That felt rare. That felt brave. Daniel slowly stood from his chair. He walked closer, unsure of what he would say. He had always believed that he needed to control situations to keep his daughters safe. But watching them now, he saw that they were not fragile. They were strong in a different way. They understood something he had forgotten, that sometimes you protect what matters not by building walls, but by opening doors. "I think they'd really like to show you," he said quietly, his voice less guarded than before. It was not a dramatic confession. It was not a grand speech, but it carried something new. It carried permission. For the first time that evening, she did not feel like a guest waiting for the right moment to leave. She felt seen. The girls stood beside her, not as obstacles, but as bridges. The room no longer felt divided between adults and children. It felt shared. Isolation began to fade, replaced by a simple, honest connection. Lila squeezed her hand once more. Ava's expression held hope, but not desperation. Daniel's posture softened, as if he were allowing himself to breathe fully for the first time that night. Claire looked toward the hallway again, but this time, the coat did not feel like it felt optional. Instead of stepping toward the door, Claire paused, and for the first time, she truly considered staying. Feeling wanted changes how a person sees themselves. Claire had grown used to being almost chosen. In past relationships, she was often described as kind, reliable, and easy to be around. Yet somehow, she was rarely the one someone fought for. She had dated men who admired her independence but kept her at a distance. She had been told she was great on paper, yet not the person someone felt certain about. Over time, she began to expect subtle dismissal. It did not always come in harsh words. Sometimes it came through delayed replies, distracted conversations, or polite smiles that never deepened into something real. Because of that history, Claire learned to leave before she could be left. She became skilled at reading small signs of emotional withdrawal, a shift in tone, a lack of questions, a wall that slowly built itself in silence. When she sensed those signs, she would protect herself by stepping back first. It felt safer to exit quietly than to wait for confirmation that she was not fully wanted. That was what she had been preparing to do. Daniel's careful politeness, his controlled responses, his emotional restraint, All of it felt familiar. She told herself. He was a single father. He had responsibilities. He had probably been hurt. But understanding did not erase the feeling of standing outside a door that never completed. Then the girls moved closer to her and something inside her shifted. Their inclusion was not polite. It was not formal. It was natural. They did not treat her like a visitor. They treated her like someone already part of the evening. When Leela held her hand and Ava spoke with simple excitement about a plant growing in the kitchen, Claire felt something she had not expected feel so quickly. She felt wanted. There was no test to pass. No role she had to perform. The girls were not measuring her worth. They were simply inviting her into their small world. That quiet acceptance carried more weight than grand gestures ever could. It told her that her presence mattered. Emotional warmth slowly replaced the guarded politeness that had defined the dinner earlier. Claire's smile became real, not careful. Her shoulders relaxed. When she laughed at something Lila said, the sound was softer and freer. The room itself seemed lighter, as if tension had been gently lifted without anyone announcing it. Daniel noticed the change. He saw how naturally Claire bent down to listen as Lila described her drawing in detail. He saw Ava stand close to her, not out of fear that she would, but out of comfort. Something unsettled him, not in a bad way, but in a revealing way. He began to question whether his emotional distance had been protecting his daughters, or simply keeping joy at a distance too. For years, he believed restraint was responsibility. He thought keeping his heart guarded would shield everyone from disappointment. But watching Claire now, he realized that his caution might also be preventing something good from growing. The girls were not fragile in the way he feared. They were brave enough to reach out. Maybe he had underestimated their strength. Claw. Ire glanced up at him, and their eyes met in a way they had not before. There was less defense in his expression. He looked thoughtful, almost uncertain, as if reconsidering his own rules. For the first time that evening, she did not feel like she was standing alone in her effort to trust did not arrive loudly. It formed quietly in the space between shared smiles and honest eye contact. Daniel stepped closer, not to control the moment, but to join it. I'm glad you're here. The words were not dramatic, but they were clear. He did not say them out of obligation. He said them because he meant them. Those 4 words landed differently than compliments ever had in Claire's past. They were not about her achievements or her personality traits. They were about her presence. She was not being evaluated. She was being welcomed. The loneliness she carried began to soften. She realized she did not need to leave early to protect herself. Staying did not feel like a risk in that moment. It felt like a choice. The girls watched both adults carefully, sensing the shift. They did not fully understand the depth of what was happening, but they knew the air felt different. Lighter, warmer, safer. Claire looked around the room again, at the table, at the drawings on the fridge, at Daniel standing a little closer than before. This evening was no longer ending the way she had expected. What began as a polite dinner was slowly turning into something none of them had planned for. Connection often changes the atmosphere before it changes people. The house did not look different, yet it felt different. The same dining table stood in the center. The same warm lights glowed softly above them. But the tension that had once sat quietly between them was no longer in control. It had loosened its hold, replaced by something gentler and less guarded. No one announced the shift. No one made a speech about it. It simply happened, like a window opening in a room that had been closed for too long. Ava led Claire toward the kitchen to see the small plant growing near the window. Lila followed closely, explaining how they watered it every other day and turned it toward the sunlight. Claire listened carefully, asking questions, smiling in a way that showed real interest. The girls were not performing kindness. They were building a bridge, step by step, between Claire and their father's quiet world. Daniel watched from a short distance, his hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. He realized he was no longer rehearsing a goodbye in his mind. Instead, he was observing how naturally Claire fit into simple. She did not try to impress them. She did not act overly careful. She laughed when Lila mispronounced a long word and gently corrected her without embarrassment. She thanked Ava for showing her the plant as if it were something special. For years, Daniel believed emotional safety meant control. It meant limiting expectations and keeping feelings measured. But now he began to question that. Watching his daughters welcome Claire so freely made him see that safety might also mean allowing room for warmth. It might mean trusting that not every connection ends in loss. Claire, too, felt the difference. Earlier, she had been aware of every pause in conversation, every small silence. Now she noticed other things instead. The way Ava's eyes brightened when she spoke about school. The way Leela leaned slightly against her side without hesitation. She did not feel like she was visiting someone else's life. She felt gently invited into. The girls continued acting as emotional bridges without realizing how powerful they were. When Daniel stepped into the kitchen, Ava looked between him and Claire and began describing how they chose the plant together at the store. She included both adults in the story, as if reminding them that shared moments could exist naturally. Lila added that maybe next time Claire could help them pick another one. The word next time hung softly in the air, not forced, not demanded, just offered. Daniel heard it clearly. Next time. The phrase stirred something inside him that felt both hopeful and fragile. He looked at Claire, expecting to see hesitation. Instead, he saw thoughtfulness, not fear. She did not pull away from the idea. She considered it. Healing does not always arrive with grand promises. Sometimes it unfolds quietly, in shared laughter over a simple plant by the way. Daniel felt a small part of his guarded heart relax. He did not suddenly become fearless. The memory of past goodbyes still lived inside him. But for the first time in a long while, those memories did not control the present moment. Loneliness, which had once felt like a constant shadow in the house, seemed less heavy. It was still there, but it no longer filled every corner. Claire's presence did not erase the past, yet it added something new, a sense that staying was possible. The girls sensed it too. Their movements were lighter. Their voices carried excitement instead of careful watching. Daniel stepped closer and stood beside Claire, not out of habit, but out of choice. Their shoulders nearly touched. He did not move away. She did not either. It was a small detail, but it meant something. They were sharing space differently now, not as distant adults managing expectations, but as people slowly learning how to stand near each other. I didn't realize how much that plant has grown, Daniel said quietly, his tone softer than before. Claire smiled at him and replied, maybe it just needed the right spot. The words were simple, yet both of them unders to the deeper meaning. For a moment, everything felt balanced. The girls talked easily. The kitchen felt warm. Hope did not feel foolish. It felt careful but real. And then Daniel's phone vibrated in his pocket. He glanced down at the screen, his expression shifting slightly as he read the notification. It was something ordinary, something from the outside world, yet it reminded him that life was not just this small, safe space. Responsibilities, past habits, and old fears still existed beyond these walls. Claire noticed the subtle change in his face. The girl sensed it too. The outside world was knocking again, and none of them knew if this fragile closeness could survive it. Fear resurfaces whenever something starts to matter. The vibration of Daniel's phone was small, but the feeling it stirred inside him was not. He looked at the screen and saw a message from an old friend asking if he was getting serious again. The words were casual, almost teasing, yet they carried weight. Getting serious again, as if caring was something risky, as if hope had a history of ending badly. Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket, but the old fears had already risen to the surface. He felt it clearly now. The more this evening began to matter, the more his mind warned him to step back. He remembered the first months after his divorce, when he allowed himself to believe things old feel normal again. He remembered introducing someone new too quickly, watching his daughters grow attached, and then having to explain why that person stopped coming over. He had promised himself he would never let them feel that Guarded felt responsible. Guarded felt safe. Across the kitchen, Claire sensed the change in him. She did not know about the mess, but she recognized the familiar look of someone retreating inward. It was the same expression she had seen before in other men. When closeness built, her own fear rose quietly. What if she had misunderstood this shift? What if she had read warmth where there was only politeness? She did not want to overstay her welcome in a home that was still learning how to open its door. For a brief moment, both adults stood inside their separate worries, even while standing only inches apart. Daniel questioned whether allowing this connection to grow would lead to disappointment. Claire questioned whether staying might place her in a position where she would eventually be asked to leave. The past whispered to both of them, reminding them of old endings, but the girls remained steady. Ava continued explaining how they planned to decorate the kitchen for the next season. Leela leaned lightly against Claire's side, completely unaware of the storm of thoughts passing between the adults. Their calm presence grounded the room. They were not afraid of this moment. They were not expecting disaster. They were simply living it. Daniel looked at his daughters and felt the weight of his internal conflict. Part of him wanted to retreat, to create distance before anything became fragile. Another part of him, the part that had softened earlier, wanted to be brave enough to stay emotionally present. He realized that avoiding pain had also meant he had been protecting his children from loss, but he had also been protecting them from seeing him choose someone openly. Claire took a small step back, not toward the door, but to give him space. She did not speak immediately. She understood that forcing reassurance would only push him further into defense. Instead, she offered something simpler. "It's okay if this feels new," she said quietly, her voice calm and honest. "I don't expect anything except honesty." Her words did not demand commitment. They did not pressure him to promise forever. They simply invited truth. Daniel felt the tension in his chest ease slightly. He realized that vulnerability did not always require dramatic declarations. Sometimes it meant admitting uncertainty instead of hiding it. "I get scared," he said, surprising even if his voice was steady, but not because of you, just because I've seen how quickly. It was the first time. That evening he spoke without careful filtering. The first time he allowed Claire to see the reason behind his distance. Claire nodded, not with judgment, but with understanding. "I know what that feels like," she replied softly. There was no competition over who had been hurt more, just shared recognition. The girls watched them quietly now. Ava sensed something important was happening. Lila looked between their faces, noticing that neither adult was looking. Daniel made a quiet decision. He could step back into safety, return to polite distance, and keep his heart protected. Or he could stay in this uncomfortable but honest space and see what it might become. He understood that courage did not mean ignoring fear. It meant choosing connection despite it. He turned fully toward Claire. "I don't want to keep standing at a distance. Not if you're willing to walk this slowly with us." The word "us" included his daughters without making it heavy. It felt natural. Claire's expression softened even more. She did not rush to answer. She simply stayed where she was. In that quiet kitchen, one simple truth began to change what this night would mean for all of them. Some departures are prevented for a reason. Claire did not reach for her coat that night. Instead, she stayed in the kitchen, standing beside Daniel and the girls as if she had always belonged in that space. The decision was quiet, almost invisible, but it changed everything. She was no longer preparing her exit in her mind. She was present fully and honestly. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel like someone waiting to be. The shift was not dramatic. There were no grand promises or sudden declarations. What changed was deeper than that. Claire stopped measuring every word she spoke. She did not scan Daniel's face for signs of withdrawal. She allowed herself to laugh freely when Lila showed her a silly dance she had learned at school. She listened as Ava described a science project with bright excitement. She was not trying to prove her value. She was simply being herself. For years, Claire had quietly accepted roles where she felt optional. She had learned to shrink her expectations to avoid disappointment. But in this house, with two brave girls, and a father learning to lower his guard, she felt something new forming. She was not being tolerated. She was being welcomed. That difference reshaped the way she saw herself. She was not too much. She was almost enough. She was simply enough. Daniel felt the change too. He realized he was no longer standing at a safe emotional distance. He had stepped forward without fully noticing when it happened. He listened more carefully when Claire spoke. He shared small details about his week without editing them to sound neutral. He even admitted that he often worried about making the wrong choice as a father. The words felt strange at first, but also relieving. He did not have to pretend strength meant silence. The girls watched everything with open eyes. They saw their father choose honesty instead of avoidance. They saw Claire respond with patience instead of pressure. Compassion was not explained to them in a lesson. It was modeled naturally in front of them. They witnessed what it looked like when adults stayed instead of slowly stepping away. Ava felt a quiet sense of pride. She had sensed the danger of another goodbye earlier that evening, and now she saw something different growing. Lila leaned her head gently against Claire's arm without asking permission, as if her heart already understood what was happening. It was not about replacing anyone from the past. It was about adding someone new to their present. The idea of chosen family began forming in small, steady, not through labels, not through titles, but through shared moments and mutual care. Daniel did not think of it as building a new family right away. He thought of it as allowing space for someone who wanted to stay. Claire did not imagine herself stepping into a role she could not handle. She imagined walking alongside them slowly and honestly. Loneliness, which had once felt like a quiet fifth person at the dinner table, lost its place. It no longer controlled the mood of the room. Hope did not rush in loudly, but it settled gently, like warmth spreading through cold hands. Daniel realized that guarding his heart had kept him safe, but it had also kept him alone. Claire realized that leaving early had protected her pride, but it had also kept her disconnected. The girls realized that sometimes speaking up can protect something beautiful before it disappears. As the evening grew later, Daniel walked Claire to the door. This time, the door did not represent an escape. It represented continuation. "Thank you for staying." His voice steady and sincere. Claire smiled and replied, "Thank you for letting me." The words were simple, but they carried meaning. Staying was no longer an accident. It was a shared choice. Ava and Lila stood in the hallway watching quietly. They did not need a promise about tomorrow. They could already feel that something important had changed. The house felt fuller not because of noise, but because of connection. When Claire finally stepped outside, it was not with the feeling of someone who had been dismissed. It was with the understanding that she would return. Daniel closed the door gently, not with fear, but with calm hope. He turned toward his daughters, who were smiling in a way that said, he understood now that resilience did not mean building walls forever. It meant learning when it was safe to open a door. What began as a guarded dinner had quietly become the first chapter of something lasting none of them had planned, but all of them were ready to choose. If this story touched something in your heart, don't just move on from it. Share it with someone who believes in second chances, and let this message travel further than this. Stay connected for more stories that remind us why choosing love over fear. And tell me honestly, if you were in Daniel's place, would you have stayed guarded, or would you have risked being chosen?